what we've noticed is that all small businesses have the same problems, right? Whether you're a media entrepreneur or whether you're running a small little shop, selling coffee. Your needs as a small entrepreneur are pretty much the same. You want to be discovered. You want people to find their way to you. You want them to enjoy the products that you have. You want them to keep coming back. You want to make sure that you have all these things right. A lot of media companies need to get to zero, and then they can really start building, right?
That was Alan Soon, co-founder of Splice, a media startup for media startups. Alan and his co-founder, Rishad Patel, have made it their mission to help out media startups in Asia as they try to build an audience and a sustainable business model.
They do this through a variety of activities, including a Slack channel with over 200 journalists and media professionals, and their audio course on building a viable media business called School of Splice. Let's hear from Rishad.
One of the things we don't talk about a lot, but I think we've made a living, Alan and I, being fanboys of the media creators that we support and work with. We love their passion, their work, and their bravery. And I think we've built a little business model around supporting them with the infrastructure and the funding and the training that they need. So let's see where that goes.
This episode is a dispatch episode from the International Journalism Festival in Perugia, Italy, where we were able to catch Alan and Rishad as they came out of their session on media entrepreneurs in Asia.
We caught them right outside a parking lot, so you may hear some cars driving by in the background.
This wasn't the first time that we were running into Alan and Rishad. We've attended a few of their events, and they have loads of resources in video and in podcast form for people starting their own media ventures.
We were excited to interview them because the work they do resonates with us, and because the media entrepreneur route can be very lonely. And Alan and Rishad have done a really great job of creating a space for people who are embarking on something that is trying to be different than some of the traditional media structures that some of us may have come up in.
So instead of us going on and on about why we enjoy listening to Alan and Rishad, let's hear directly from them, starting with how they grew their own business.
So Splice has been around for 7 years. It's been a long journey. We first started out as a consultancy, and then over time kind of realized where, some of the big changes were needed. So we actually believe that where media is going right now requires the entry of many media startups, and that's what we're most excited about. When we meet creators who are doing amazing work, we want to find ways to get behind them. It's also our secret way of trying to stay relevant as old men. So this is something that we love, we care a lot about. We want to make sure that we help raise a new generation of media startups and find ways to support them.
You both speak about being good friends. How do you work with your friend and get through some of the more difficult moments?
It's like any other marriage, right? It's about figuring out what makes the other person happy and finding ways to do that together.
And yeah, I mean, Alan loves your tech. I love food. It works, as long as I'm fed every 2 hours, and Alan sees a new mic every other minute.
That's right. And yeah, if I see some interesting equipment, I'll be like, oh, that's great. And he, for him it's food. But it is really like a marriage. There's some things that will work really well for you, some things that will really annoy you, but that's just the way it is. The next day is a whole different conversation. But the one thing that really gets us excited is really the work that we do. Nothing, if there's ever a way that we need to realign where we are in our heads, we just talk about work, and that just makes it all perfect.
Work is mostly what we talk about when we're done with work.
Yeah.
Which is kind of
just
bizarre.
Like parents talking about kids all the time.
It is.
Same.
Yeah, I have to say, one of the reasons I keep being reminded of why working with Splice is so important, being Splice is so important. We were on stage just minutes ago in a panel minutes ago with two creators, Anu and Tanmoy, and hearing them talk about their work and being privileged enough to be up there presenting it with them makes you feel like proud parents. So that's another level to the marriage. We now have many kids.
You did in-person events before the pandemic. Then you pivoted to creating an online community, and now you're back in person again. Are there any things you missed or What has been most striking to you about that journey?
I think the nice thing about the pandemic was that it taught us that you could reach people anywhere in the world. You could get anyone on the phone, on a Zoom rather, and get a conversation going. So I think what was really unique for us was just a number of people that we met, just like that. It allowed us to run a whole bunch of programs from Mongolia to Papua New Guinea. There were ways for us to do these things that we could not otherwise have done if we were only thinking about how to get on a plane and booking a room so we can run a workshop. All of those things were just out of the picture, and it just made things in many ways a lot simpler. But now that we've come back, and this past week has been really ridiculously awesome, we're reminded again about how wonderful it is to see people again, like the both of you.
And as a product designer, I'm reminded of the parallels between the real world and that digital world that we create, and everything in the spectrum between, is that you go in with intent. So being online and doing online meetings like all of us have been doing for the past 2 years and a bit, there's a lot of intent involved. You go in there with a specific intent, but coming to something like Perugia, the intent is involved in setting up meetings and going to sessions. But then there's the beautiful thing called discovery, where you're walking down the street and you meet old friends from who knows where, and you meet new friends, and it's just beautiful.
You've also managed to set up a sense of community, especially for people who are going at entrepreneurship solo. Was that a part of the plan, or is that something that happened serendipitously?
It's something it's the reason we exist.
Yeah.
Community is our DNA.
Yeah.
We tend not to be excited about talking about ourselves as a company, primarily because there's not very much to talk about, really. We're two guys. This is about 100% of the company.
It's pretty boring.
Yeah, it really is. And I think we're only as good as what we do for media creators and media startups. And I think that we help work with the media ecosystem to enable these folks and to remind them of the heroes that they actually are already. We're just conveners. And so we are fortunate enough to be able to be in the middle of this community whenever they will have us, and to be able to strengthen them as they grow.
No, I was just going to say that the one lesson that we're always mindful of is that if you do a good enough job, the community will do the talking for you. You don't have to talk about yourself. You don't have to talk about Splice. It gets done if you are doing a great job.
As an organization that works in the startup space, what are some needs that you're seeing that are not being met for people who are just getting started?
What we've noticed is that all small businesses have the same problems, right? Whether you're a media entrepreneur or whether you're running a small little shop, selling coffee. Your needs as a small entrepreneur are pretty much the same. You want to be discovered. You want people to find their way to you. You want them to enjoy the products that you have. You want them to keep coming back. You want to make sure that you have all these things right. A lot of media companies need to get to zero, and then they can really start building, right? And for us, getting to zero is where you need to first of all learn how to run a small business. If what kind of business entity do you set up? What kind of legal frameworks do you need? What kind of bookkeeping do you need? Like very basic things. And then comes the question of content. What kind of content will you create? What platforms will these be on? All media entrepreneurs kind of go through the same journey. They all have the same needs on their front, right? Learning about your audiences. How do you serve them better? What are products that they need? What are things they need done every single day? All of these things are important, and we want to keep building products along those lines. So something new is going to be coming up soon.
Something new coming up soon. But yeah, I also wanted to add that one of the most transformational, pivotal, penny drop moments that we've seen on the faces of our community, our media startup and media creator community, has been when they talk to their audiences and ask their audiences what they need. In the product creation process, we often assume that the product comes first. It doesn't really, right? The appetite or the need for it comes first because you're solving an audience problem or a community problem. and we help media companies talk to their audiences and figure out what it is they want, and then translate those into solutions and products. Those are great moments, and I think a lot of media startups need those ways of conversation.
One challenge that many startups face is finding the balance between rapidly scaling and building value for the community they're trying to reach. What is your advice for people struggling with this?
So it really comes down to scale is mostly not something we worry about too much for ourselves or for our communities. But what we do think about is that nothing can start if you're not relevant. So we say be useful, and we say be relevant. But more than anything, you build something that's valuable enough to pay for. We want our creators to continue doing what they're doing. We want them to start listening to their audiences. That's where products come from. That's where value comes from. I think that utility and relevance are where you begin.
Yeah, we really hate that word scale because we come up, against that so often, right? Mm-hmm. It's easy for people to say to us, hey, why don't you hire 5 more people, and then you can do 50 more things. We don't want to do that. We don't want to be bigger, and we don't necessarily need to do more. We think that by spending more time with the community, listening to what they want, this is the stuff that really brings us joy. Mm-hmm. Neither of us will wake up in the morning thinking we want to run a 50-person company. That would be horrible. We like what we do. We like being small because it gives us the agility that we love. As a media startup, that's the only thing you have that's really within your control. How quickly you respond to something, how quickly you spot a trend, how quickly you test against that.
How quickly you fail.
And how quickly you fail and save
so
money.
Important.
The best way to save money is to fail quickly.
Do you see a lot of people resonating with that approach?
Yeah, so I think one place to start is to ask yourself how much money do you need to make every month, mm-hmm. and how what kind of lifestyle do you want that money to support, mm-hmm. and if you are honest with yourself, then that's fine. Not everybody needs to be an Elon Musk, right?
We also ask a lot of questions around: do you really need to be publishing 236 pieces of content a month?
Yeah. Or what does it do for your business?
Exactly. What does it do for your audiences? Is there a reason that you're doing this? Who are you serving? Isn't perhaps journalism a service industry? Aren't there readers and communities or audiences and communities you want to serve? And if you find that you are serving and solving problems, you've created that magical state of product market fit. What could be better than that?
Is that the approach you took towards building your own community?
It's always a bit of both, but it's the thing is that's what we want to be. We don't want to be anonymous. We don't want to be, a company that no one cares about. And mm-hmm. we were just talking about this yesterday about brand, right? What does brand mean to us? Or actually today, when people come up to us and they say, you guys have such a strong brand, mm-hmm. what do they actually mean? They probably mean that, we have a way of working, we have a way of speaking with our community, and we have a product that people recognize. And maybe that's all we need to succeed, right? That's the stuff that makes us happy.
I also, until we get it better, because that's, everything is, whatever we do at Splice is ultimately a big experiment. But we also have a very specific point of view about media. Perhaps because we've, been there and done that, and we're, several decades old. And I think that point of view tends to be very user-centric. It tends to be a product mindset. It tends to be about relevance, about niche audiences, about actually having conversations for your audience, about having respect. If we can teach that, and if we can see that work, we're happy. And if that changes at some point, we'll be the first to let people know.